Loren Baker, founder of Search Engine Journal. Welcome to today's Search Engine Journal show. With me today, I have Bill Slawski, Go Fish Digital and SEO by the Sea. Hey, Bill, how's it going?
Good, really good. It's
good to catch up.
it's sunny and bright. It's still the summer, and the area where we live at, it tends to get warmer as we get into the fall.
Which
and
is
we
interesting.
We get wildfire threats and Santa Ana winds, but it's still
Yes.
I'm 10 minutes away from the beach, which means I can go park next to the beach and walk along the beach.
Very nice. Very nice. Oh, we did have a little special effect there. Yeah. So how long ago did you move to Southern California?
5 years ago. I hopped on a plane in Virginia in January. It took 2 hours to de-ice the wings, but the plane finally took off and flew out here. My clothes and my car caught up to me a month later.
Yep. Sounds familiar. We ended up moving out, 9 years ago now, 8 years ago now. And I decided to drive cross country in late February without really checking the weather. With family in the car. We had hailstorms, snowstorms, windstorms, everything else, but then finally made it to sunny California. So I'm glad we could both make it out here.
I've taken the flight before. I was comfortable with that. I wasn't comfortable with living in an apartment for a month without any furniture.
Yeah,
I ordered some stuff from Amazon to give me the sense of what it was going to be like. I get a couch, stuff like that. Nice. So I left a lot of stuff behind in Virginia. I went through, left things like record players, DVD players, CD players, books. I had a set of bookshelves. I brought about 20 books with me. I packed those into a crate.
Sometimes you have to hit the reset button.
It was good to get a restart. It was I wanted to see parts of California while I got out here, and I started traveling to things like a gold mine in Julian. And if you're taller than 5'10", you don't go to the gold mine because gold miners were short.
I'm not going to go to the gold mine anytime soon. So
I bumped my head a few times in the gold mine.
Oh yeah. So welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, Bill and I about almost 20 years ago now, we used to work together it wasn't the dawn of the SEO ages then. It was 2002, 2003. So I think things have kind of been around for a little bit.
Well, it was 2005.
Was it 2005?
I know this for certain because that was the year I built my website, SEO by the Sea. We were both on the second floor looking out the window at the where the Susquehanna River met the Chesapeake Bay.
Correct.
And there were sailboats bouncing up and down. I thought of the name SEO by the Sea. And I went home and I put together a WordPress site in 2 hours. And I started a blog to have a free conference in Havre de Grace.
Yep.
And once the conference happened, I had to decide, what am I going to do with this website? I started writing to it. I started writing about patents. I started writing about papers, events. And I kept on writing about the patents.
So the patent stuck.
I've learned an incredible amount about what's going on and how companies like Google have decided to change our reality. Because they have. Things like Yellow Pages, the phone books have disappeared. I was delivered a phone book about 3 years ago. Somebody left it on my front doorstep. I threw it in the trash immediately.
It is amazing how they have changed our reality over the years. And I remember when you started SEO by the Sea, you were pretty deep in the patents at the time. I think back then we were looking at things like Ask had were doing some plans around their rich search results, right? Because it was a big change at the time. Maybe it wasn't Ask. I could be off here.
You left a copy of a paper from Microsoft at my desk for me on gradient descent. So Microsoft was doing frank retrieval or machine learning. They published a paper that said they had 523 different ranking factors, which was much more than the 200 Google had.
Right. And that's what got you into it?
It was stuff like that. Yeah. It's like when I worked at the court doing legal stuff, and all the people I worked with recognized that if they had a problem with their computer, I could usually fix it within half an hour. If they contacted Judicial Information Center, it would take 2 or 3 days. So an opening came up in my court for a technology position, and the job posting just started appearing at my desk. It's as if it walked there. Yeah. And I said, this is a subtle hint.
Yep. That's true. That's true. So before we get started talking deeper into search patterns and stuff like that, I'd just like to thank our sponsors, Ahrefs and Azuma, for making today's episode possible. I'm a big fan of Ahrefs, Azuma as well on the paid search side. So really happy to have the support of both of these companies as we get to talk about patents. I've noticed that, and I think we talked about this a number of years ago.
Yeah.
Well, when you were first doing patent search, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were a little bit more difficult to find because sometimes companies don't necessarily publish patents as transparently where you're going through a database and you can just search for Google patents. You have to know the names of the engineers, the names of the executives, the names of the people that maybe signed off on those. Is that still the case, or is it easier to find now?
They're just as easy to find. They weren't that difficult to find before. I was just looking at more sources than I am now. I tended to look at a wider range. I wanted to look at the Yahoo version and the Microsoft version and the Google version. There was one on page segmentation from each of those search engines, and they're called different things. And I want to see why they were different, what they were using, what language they were using. Sometimes the search engine uses specific language that isn't too factual on its face. Like Google uses the word content whenever they're talking about advertisements. And content, we think of content, we think about the stuff that a web page is made of. What attracts people to the page. They think of content as the stuff that advertisements are made of, and what gets people to click on those things.
Interesting. It shows where priorities can be from sometimes.
Yeah, and there are other words like that where it's defined within patents usually. So
when you're going through a lot of these patents and you've dug through them and kind of more or less translated them on SEO by the sea, how many of them do you see actually coming to fruition? And what are the timelines typically? Because this patent that I saw you share yesterday on the metrics behind, entity ranking, so to speak, ranking search results based on entity metrics. This was filed in 2012.
I didn't write about that patent. A friend of mine did. A couple friends, actually. Dave Davies and Barbara Starr. They both wrote about that patent.
Nice.
And you can see the results of the patent if you do a search for somebody like Tom Hanks and you look at their knowledge graph. They'll have data in that knowledge graph that fits different areas that build those metrics. Like there are prizes, and they'll tell you when Tom Hanks won Academy Awards.
Okay. So let's see. Let's look at your tweet the other day. Google has patented the metrics they use to rank entities: relatedness, notability, contribution, and prizes. So when I was thinking of prizes, I was thinking of like winning a goldfish bowl at the carnival or something. So by
Right.
prizes, you mean kind of like award, recognition, maybe by industry peers or something like
Okay,
that.
so you've got a computer in front of you.
Yes.
So do a search for Best Science Fiction 2021.
Okay.
Okay, you get a carousel, a search carousel of pictures of books.
Of books, correct.
And they're ranking those books as to which ones are the best.
Mm-hmm.
And they're creating a knowledge graph based on each of those pages, each of those books appears upon. And they're ranking the entities of those books based upon certain categories. So the first one is most science fiction-y book of that year, whatever categories they're ranking them on. So they may be using metrics like the relatedness, the notability, the prizes, the contributions. So we often see those types of things appear most in knowledge graphs, but they are ranking entities sometimes. And some entities are easier to rank because the query fits the category that we want to see, like tallest skyscrapers, New York City. And you'll see a bunch of, you'll see a search carousel with different skyscrapers in New York. And it'll base them on how tall the buildings are. So it's not necessarily just relatedness, notability, prize, or contributions, but we do see things like Academy Awards appearing in the knowledge graph for Tom Hanks. Mm-hmm. So we know they're ranking, they're paying attention to those things, they're tracking them.
Interesting. So how can companies learn from this, right? Like we're not all Tom Hanks, we're not all getting Oscars, which I would imagine the Academy of what is it, Academy of Film and Sciences would or whatever it is, Academy of Motion Pictures would broadcast that somewhere. It's broadcast everywhere. It's covered everywhere, right? We're not necessarily winning any Pulitzers or Nobel Prizes.
So you remember Universal Search?
Yes.
So Universal Search, the idea was that Google would show these vertical results. It was vertical creep into search results, where they would add videos, they would add images, they would show maps, they would add these other types of things. Well, there was an augmentation patent, an augmented search patent, which said if we can detect an entity in a query, we'll show knowledge-related results. So we'll show a knowledge graph, we'll show related questions people also ask, type things. We'll show related entities. If you search for Amazon, you'll get a dozen different knowledge type results, including a set of related entities. And these are businesses that may be similar in some ways to Amazon.
Got you.
So when you have a chance to feed Google information about your business, you're able to tell it what you're a member of, what you're a subsidiary of, how you're related to other things. The word knowledge appears in a few patents from Google, and it's defined as relationships. So when they have a tuple of information, subject, verb, object, they're telling you we're tracking, say, Johnny Bench was a Cincinnati Red, is a member of Cincinnati Reds. So they're telling you who's a member of what.
Right.
They're telling you which company is a subsidiary of something like a Procter & Gamble. Mm-hmm. You're feeding that information in a script, a schema that tells the world how things are related. I had a client for a while, and they were named after a paramilitary organization. They weren't named after them. They had the same name as them. They were started by three of the biggest cell providers in the United States: Verizon, Sprint, and T-Mobile.
Okay.
And their logo was on every Android phone in the country.
Got you. So did
And
Google?
and they changed their name because their name was ISIS. And they did think that was a good name.
No, probably
No.
not. No.
Yeah.
What did they change it to?
It does. I'm not sure it matters much now.
Both. Okay.
So 2013 Google I/O conference introduced the invisible same as,
Mhm.
which said in the text of pages you can add a metadata that shows around the entity old name a link to a same as and the new name. So in this case, I suggested they use a Wikipedia, which talked about how they changed your name.
Mhm.
So I did like a 98-page long audit that included that. 2 weeks before the audit is due, Google purchases them.
Oh, interesting.
They use their app to in Android Pay. So it could have been a fairly successful app.
Gotcha. I haven't heard of the. I'll have to look up the invisible same as. Do you see any benefit if you're a site owner to include competitors to back up the same as, or not same as, but just similar to in the knowledge graph?
I've seen including product information schema to
Mhm.
appear in same as, or
Mhm.
to appear in product search for free.
Mhm.
And Google may show similar products to something somebody searches for, which may include yours, even though
Yeah.
you're a competitor.
Yeah.
And if they show yours, you may sell some products to people who weren't interested in buying your product at first.
Yeah, I noticed that a bit also. I think when image search started incorporating product schema into the images as well, in the same way that they'll show similar images.
Yeah.
There were also similar products on the right-hand side when you clicked on the lead image to one.
And image search has been getting smarter. Reverse image search now has categories, and categories are often ontologies, which means if you search for Donald Trump and then you search for Robert F. Kennedy, you'll get different categories that relate to the history of those individuals and the history of the images that people took of them. Like the Donald Trump one might show you Donald Trump Time magazine caricatures, because he has a couple famous Time magazine images that are part of his personal history. And when you get to Robert F. Kennedy, you'll see pictures of the grassy knoll that he was assassinated at in Dallas, because it's part of his history too. When you search for Carlsbad, California, you'll see pictures of Legoland and the beach, because they're part of Carlsbad. It's part of the anthology.
So, taking that into consideration, you recently, it's a nice transition, Bill, into this write-up that you published a couple of days ago on Go Fish Digitals. I'll go ahead and I'll share the link in our chat here on YouTube, and then listeners can look it up too. Just search for Bill Slawski, detecting brand penetration over geographic locations. So I read this a little bit.
Yeah.
Not an understanding like you have, but what I basically got from it is that there's ways for Google to identify brands which may be referred to the most, used the most, have the most types of image recognition in specific locations around the country or
Yeah.
around the globe, and utilizing that data to help make results more relevant for people searching in those areas. Am I onto this? Is this halfway near?
It's almost as science fiction-y as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember when Google acquired Skybox?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, Skybox was a aviation company that would take photographs of,
Oh yeah.
or
Okay.
satellite company that would take photographs of parking lots of businesses, and they
Mhm.
could tell you how busy or slow a business was based upon what the foot traffic was their business. So Google was looking at those photographs to get that type of information.
Interesting.
So Google has these street view cars that are driving around,
Mhm.
taking lots of pictures of storefronts and so on. So what if those pictures, Google said, we're going to analyze what's in the pictures. We're going to see what types of brands they have in the storefront, what they're selling. We're going to analyze a lot of pictures. We get a lot of pictures on the web all the time for free from places like Flickr.
Yep.
They have XF data, which tells us where they're taken from. We can start counting how much of everything there is everywhere.
Android devices, Picasso, everything.
Logos on cars.
Mhm.
I mean, you live in California, you see mostly California license plates.
Mhm.
You see lots of different brands. You live in Delaware, you see mostly Maryland and Pennsylvania license plates.
It's a good Delaware joke.
Yeah. So
It's true.
So it is true. I mean, I saw a Texas license plate the other day that surprised me. Somebody drove from Texas to California.
Yeah, kind of the opposite trend.
I don't see too many Hawaii license plates.
No, that's always a treat.
Yeah.
So let's get a little bit deeper into this patent, because one thing when I was kind of looking it over, when I was glancing it over, what was interesting to me was not just products, but also brands that are more prevalent in locations. And the first thing I thought of was like grocery store conglomerates, right?
Yeah.
You have Albertsons, Safeway, Acme, all different names depending upon where you live. You also like Hardee's and Carl's Jr., like pretty easy stuff probably for Google to figure out when someone's looking for an Albertsons or an Acme or whatever it may be. But the ability to see all of these signs and know what's going on. And then years back, I was working on a car insurance campaign. This was like 10 years ago. And the car insurance company, we were working on their unbranded search, right?
Yeah.
So we were trying to rank for things like car insurance and affordable car insurance and stuff like that. And we noticed that in two specific geo areas, Philadelphia and Orlando, their unbranded results ranked much higher than everywhere else. So we contacted the client, and we were talking to the client about on a call like this. They're like, "Oh yeah, we're currently testing a new television and radio campaign in those two markets." So I found that to be really interesting, because it sounded like, to me, connecting the dots here, is that people in those markets were searching for the brand name more. Therefore, Google made the connection that people in Philadelphia and Orlando are looking for that business, and its rankings went up in that area. Or there could have been some other connection, like maybe for some reason Google thought that those were local entities that had more of a presence in those areas because of the type in traffic or something like that. And that was years back, right?
Yeah.
So how does this specific patent work, and is it similar to any of those examples that I was talking about?
So the patent said that they can look at photographs, or they can look at images submitted by people, but it didn't limit itself there. It said it could also look at targeted advertisements.
Mm-hmm.
So it could see who's advertising what and what geographic locations, because they're tying the images to the locations, because they want to know where all the brands are everywhere.
Right.
They want to know how many Saabs or how many Yugos or how many BMWs are in Pennsylvania. I mean, we there's questions about whether or not brands are ranking factors for search engines, and there's a lot of argument over that. At one point in time, Eric Schmidt said something at some conference like brands are the most important thing in the world.
The old BMW example, right?
But he didn't necessarily elaborate on that. And there's not, a brand is more of a mental impression, a state of mind that gets created by a certain company.
Mhm.
You see Apple, and Apple does things their own way. They have packaging that's unique to them, bags, connectors. They change their connectors, maybe because they want to make more money. So when you get a power cord from Apple, you have to get a lightning cord. Then you have to get a USB-C cord. And it's like, let's change it this year so we can make a few $1 billion more.
Tim Cook's great innovations at Apple.
Yeah.
So how does this apply to SEO at the end of the day? Where do you see this going? And what can we do?
I see this as a change like the phone book change, like the phone book disappearing. I see this as a way of I saw a letter from the Nelson Group, the ones who tell you how popular TV shows are on TV by having people report on what they watch.
Right.
And I figured that was dead. I was surprised to see it because I know a lot of people have cable, and you can electronically track what they're watching on cable. So you don't need Nelson reporters or people who are taking that survey.
Right.
But they are still doing that. So we can't tell just based on advertisements how much brand penetration is in an area. But I watched the M. Night Shyamalan Signs and a few other movies he made that took place in Pennsylvania or Delaware. You get to that part of Delaware or Pennsylvania where you have the Brandywine River, and it's impossible to tell which one you're in sometimes because they're so similar. So you don't know where the boundaries are, and the street signs are these little greenback things that are stuck on corners, and they don't look like average street signs. So you can't tell geographically when you've left Delaware and entered Pennsylvania or not. You don't know where the border is. So Google is tracking carefully where brands are, and they're avoiding locations like this, or they know when they're in Delaware and when they're in Pennsylvania. They're much better at it than we are.
I would also see this data being useful. I remember when we were growing up, there was probably a couple of types of shoes to choose from. There was as many types of shoes as there were like TV channels, right?
Yeah.
Or jeans. You were either Lee's or Levi's or Wranglers.
Right. I learned about Vans shoes.
When I
came out here.
Oh, I learned about Vans for the first time watching Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
So there's a science fiction author who teaches math at university, who taught math at University of San Diego, and he wrote some science fiction based on Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote one called Rainbow's End, which is about the book scanning project at Stanford, and Google plays a part in it. So he's sort of like a local celebrity.
Huh. Interesting. I know Fast Times introduced me to Vans, pizza, bagels. What else? Well, a couple other things probably I shouldn't say on air. And like when I was a kid growing up in the countryside, you didn't see any of that. So it took a movie to introduce the Vans brand to the rest of America in like the early 80s, right?
Yeah.
But now we're living, especially post-pandemic, we're living in a world where there are brands popping up left and right with direct-to-commerce, Shopify, setting up a Shopify store becoming so easy, setting up a clothing brand becoming so easy. There's brands that are new to me, but they're not new to a younger generation. Like, for example, Allbirds shoes or
which
Bomba
is
socks.
the Allbirds shoes is all cotton, all natural material
I believe
from
so.
like New Zealand or Australia.
I believe
Yeah.
so. But I think my point is that we have these brands popping up that normally would not be part of a Nielsen survey, right? Because a Nielsen survey, I would imagine, would be like, oh, what was your favorite Super Bowl commercial? Doritos or Bud Light or Pepsi, right?
Yeah.
But, you can't necessarily do a, what is your favorite shoe multiple choice question when now suddenly there's hundreds of types of different shoes, right?
So there was another patent that came out within the past 2 years on product lines.
Mm-hmm.
And they said for e-commerce sites, we suggested these sites come up with a product page where they point to old products and they point to new products from the same company, because you have companies that change products. You have Apple computers that may start carrying certain types of drives, have certain types of memory. It used to be megabytes, now it's gigabytes.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So they're focusing more upon places without geographic locations.
So kind of going back to the example that you used earlier when you're talking about Tom Hanks from an entity perspective, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If you go to Google and you search for Tom Hanks, it's pretty easy to go to Wikipedia and look at that timeline, Stand Up, Bosom Buddies, Splash.
You can see all the
Forrest
movies
Gump,
where Rita Wilson was in too.
Yeah. Exactly. So you can really understand his life, right? But then from an e-commerce perspective, like what you just said seems a little bit counterproductive to what I've always heard about e-commerce, is that like, oh, you run out of an item, you launch a new item, maybe you can redirect, maybe you can clean up. You don't want to have all of these out of stock items. But what you're saying is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, by setting up a company product evolution timeline,
you can set up internal linking better by connecting things that are within the same product lines.
So Google can see how this product has evolved. Google can see what people have called this product over time.
And they're built-in recommendations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, when I saw a commercial last night for the new Samsung flip phone.
Yeah.
But in the commercial, and I haven't looked it up yet, it had the K-pop band BTS was promoting the phone. And from what I got from the commercial, the phone's actually called the BTS, right?
Yeah.
Which could stand for multiple things. Behind the scenes, BTS the band, BTS the phone. There's probably a bacon tomato sandwich. There's probably tons of acronyms that could be used for over time.
I went shopping with my father for Christmas a couple of years ago, and we went to an electronics store like a Fry's, and he was looking for a DVD player for my mom. And we got to the electronics section. He had a choice between two. One was a product he had heard of, and one was half the price, but he'd never heard of it before. And they're both Korean companies, and they both most likely had the same chipsets inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that was twice the price was the one he wanted to get because he had heard of it before. He knew the brand. So there's value in those brands and building them up.
So even if you're a new brand, or even if you're a marketplace which features products, the ability to show the timeline and life cycle about how that product has evolved over time, because you might get, I have an iPhone 8.
Yeah.
I don't know what iPhone numbers iPhone's on right now. They're using an X for a 10
I
for a while, maybe a
I
12,
I
whatever.
think it's 12 at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So
They do some different things that Android phones don't do. Like if you have a Apple computer, you can register your phone with the computer, and when your phone rings, your computer rings, and you can answer the phone with your computer, or you can make calls with your computer,
which is convenient.
And you don't need to be next to your phone. And that type of syncing doesn't happen with Android.
So I can define the brand progression over time. Therefore, even if I'm not the branded site, I would imagine that rich information is useful for Google, one, understanding the brand, and then two, understanding me as a trusted resource that cites that brand. So by citing the brand and and building it up over time within my own, maybe I'm a marketplace that sells an item.
And Google may know that you're the single most authoritative purveyor of that brand in California.
Right.
Because they're tracking brand penetration.
Got it. What other, when I was putting together the plans, one thing that always helped me over the years, reading your blog, knowing you, listening to you talk, things like that, was helping me stay ahead of the curve, right?
Yeah.
So not just optimizing for search today, but trying to optimize for search 2 years, 3 years, 5 years down the road, or at least kind of get those building blocks there so they can be adjusted over time.
Yeah.
What are some other patents or studies or papers that you've seen recently that you think are very important right now from an optimization perspective, and the direction that Google is going with, like the recent experience updates that we've had over the course of the summer, the title rewrites, the link updates, the everything else that's rolled out?
One thing I didn't expect from patents was that they would change over time. So there was one patent a few years ago on quote searching, and it said, we'll search for a quote in a knowledge base, and we'll tell you who said it, and we'll tell you more about them. They came out with a continuation patent. A continuation patent is the same patent, except with a new set of claims. And the claims are the important part. The claims are what a prosecutor looks at to decide whether or not to grant a patent. They can ignore the description and things that you're teaching people, learn it in the art with your description, so that they can potentially build what you're building. But if the claims are imitated somewhere else, they're not going to grant you the patent. So what the claim said was, we're no longer going to look for your quote in knowledge graphs. We're going to search audio, and we're going to find all the audio on the web in places like YouTube that have that quote, and we'll return those to the people looking for it, because they know what the quote is. They know who already said it. They don't care who said it, because they know that. They want to show somebody that person saying that.
Right.
They want that as a search result. They want a video. So we're analyzing videos. We're getting much better at transcripts, and Google has been getting much better at transcripts. I did a study about 5 years ago where I went through about 600, 700 videos and compared them to transcripts to see how many words were misspelled. It was a lot. I came across one Obama video, which was a State of the Union address, which looked like somebody had edited it for correctness, because there was not too much incorrect. But a lot of times, place names, product names are misspelled in videos, or were 5 years ago. They've gotten much, much better. They're analyzing. And I love old movies. I love quotes from things like, I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived...
Kilgore.
I lived about 10 miles south of the guy who said that in the movies.
Is Don Corleone's consigliere, Robert Duvall. Yeah, so that is interesting because, there seems to be chatter, and maybe, I'm not sure how accurate this is, but there could be, and there's also less of it. So link the dependence upon links and depreciation over time of the dependence upon links, right? For Google identifying, it used to be with when Google more or less launched.
Yeah.
If someone was linking to you in a favorable, if someone was linking to you, it was considered to be a favorable manner. It was considered to be someone that liked your site and supported it, and basically word of mouth, right? Hey, here's, according to, Bill at SEO by the Sea, link, yada, 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 said this, right? Then we got into the world of blogging where everyone was writing and linking, right? So there has to be an acceleration of linking, right?
Yeah.
And then link marketplaces. I won't get into that too much, but what used to be content, what I thought of content, it was typically the typed page, right?
And I'm sitting in my home 5 years ago in Warrenton, Virginia, having felt something roll across the tin roof of the house, and a can of beans in my kitchen falls to the floor. And I'm thinking, did I just experience an earthquake? And I go to Twitter and I type in earthquake.
Right.
And I wasn't the only one. There was an earthquake about 60 miles south of me. It's real time, and people use Twitter for real-time results. And important real-time results haven't had time to develop links to them.
No, they haven't.
Same with news stories. Your most important news stories are the timely ones, the ones that haven't had time to get people linked to them, but the first ones to say something.
Right. Also,
so links are much less important for those.
Also, if there is an earthquake, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to go to Twitter and you're going to write, hey, there must be an earthquake. Can of Campbell's beans chicken noodle soup just fell off my shelf, right?
Yeah.
Are you going to go to your blog and write, oh, there must have been an earthquake? A can of Campbell's chicken soup hyperlink Campbell's chicken soup page fell off my shelf.
No, I made the mistake of getting in my car, driving 60 miles south through the town of Virginia that the earthquake happened, drive past a sign that said nuclear power facility, and said, this wasn't a good idea. Yeah.
So backing up a little bit, Google considers content a lot of the times in their patents or their papers, they're referring to advertising. When you and I talk about content, we're typically talking about the typed word, right?
Yeah.
If you ask a 20, 30-year-old what is content, they're going to probably say video and pictures, right?
Yeah.
Putting content on my Insta, putting content on YouTube. We're making content here. We're making
potentially
content
something
there.
Interactive,
right? Which does not link.
So it does. If you make it a page that's interactive and you link to the page.
Right.
So we were working with a limousine company, and we wanted to have a creative content campaign idea for them. So they gave us information about where people were getting engaged in the DC area. And we had an interactive map where you could go to these places, click on them, get photographs of the places. And that got very popular for a period of time.
I remember that campaign.
Yeah. And that was very interactive. It was something that you went to and made an event out of.
So if you're building a campaign like that, you can get your link equity, right?
Yeah.
But if more and more people are taking pictures, doing video, creating audio content, and they're talking about a brand, is there a connection? Do you feel there's a connection, or have you read anything that if there's a connection with brand mentions and passing on the brand mention component within audio, video, or even written to help Google from a discoverability perspective, and to know that there's more people talking favoritively about this brand, favoritively about this product.
So you've just made the same mistake I've seen other SEOs make.
What's that?
Where you think that it needs to be a brand mention to have value. It's an entity.
Yes.
It's a product. It's an entity. It's something that people know about specifically. So if you can collect key value pairs, knowledge and information about those things, you can collect that type of stuff and track it, sort of like you're tracking brand penetration.
Mm-hmm.
You're tracking entity penetration into an area. So Google knows about the facts and the way things change and evolve over time. With brand mentions, Google's been used a brand mention feature in one of the Panda patents, where they said, we'll look at how often pages rank for brand mentions and how often they rank for keyword results. And if they rank a lot more for the brand mentions, we may think there's something wrong with that. Sort of like pages on things like you're optimizing for slight variations, how to tie a knot, how to knot a tie, how to boil water, how to heat up water. It's like, get a 300-page website that's all about how to heat up water in different ways and those are different ways of searching for that information, and they're trying to rank for each and every one of them. Mm-hmm. So Google was saying a lot about, since 1999, they were saying we're looking for specific key value pairs about entities, about different subjects, about books, for instance. And they developed that into rich search results. They started out with books and they moved on to other things. Mm-hmm. Like starred results and so on. Things that had clicks.
Yep. I remember when we were working together in 2005 or so.
Yeah.
We were talking to, I guess we can talk about this. So we're talking to Baltimore.org. We're working on Baltimore.org. And it was Yeah. And we went into it. They're like, well, we want to rank for this keyword, and we want to rank for that keyword, and we want this many pages ranking for this or that. It kind of predetermined. And you had said, no, like you're Baltimore.org. You should be writing about why Baltimore is, how important Edgar Allan Poe is to the history of Baltimore.
Yeah.
Or why the Baltimore port area and is important from this perspective, or the War of 1812, not just trying to rank for Fort McHenry tickets,
right?
But Baltimore's role, or I guess role, why the Baltimore didn't burn down. I think Havre de Grace did to an extent, and DC did, but not Baltimore, right?
There was one guy in Havre de Grace who kept on shooting at the British ships with the cannon.
Yeah.
They kidnapped him. They charged 30 pieces of silver to get him back. His daughter paid.
I think there's a plaque or something.
They didn't burn down all of Havre de Grace, only part of it.
Because of the one guy with the cannon.
Yeah.
Shows what we can do.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was kind of blown away during that discussion, because you had talked about, let's build a resource. Let's not just try to rank temporarily utilizing what the SEO tactic is of the day. Let's unfold this a little bit, back up. You're a resource.
We had already built pages for Baltimore museums, Baltimore restaurants, Baltimore bars. You want to create a page for Baltimore Black History. Mm-hmm. Guess what? Baltimore is Black history.
Yep.
Baltimore has famous churches with people like Sojourner Truth working at them. Baltimore is well known for musicians like Billie Holiday or Cab Calloway. I mean, there's a 9-foot-tall statue of Billie Holiday in Baltimore. Write about it. Tell people where it's at. Let them go visit. It's a visitors convention center.
Right.
Its purpose was to get people to visit Baltimore. Tell them what's there. Tell them where the townhomes that Frederick Douglass bought when he was 60. Mm-hmm. He escaped Baltimore as a teenager as a slave. Mm-hmm. He returned free and rich. And he helped build the city up. Tell them where they can find those townhouses. Let them actually come to Baltimore, tour these places, see the historic Black churches and the colleges.
There was also another campaign that was similar that we were talking about. I don't know if we ever worked on it, but it was with Johns Hopkins, and it was very similar. Yeah. They wanted to rank for this and they wanted to rank for that, but you had discussed, hey, let's tell people a little bit more about what's in the Charles Village area around Johns Hopkins, what it's like living on campus. Right. What are the kinds of restaurants that students would visit on campus? What are the museums, like the Baltimore Museum of Art in the area, and the different galleries?
Right. For the Baltimore sports one, I said, okay, this is an official organization website. They could go to the head coach of the Ravens and say, we'd like to create a video of what you like about Baltimore, why you live here. We think it would draw an incredible number of people. Will you film this? They had the power to do that.
They do. And if I remember correctly, didn't you get press credentials for SEO by the Sea at one time, or apply for press credentials?
I had that happen with a couple videos, pictures I took at Flickr that PBS got in touch with me about.
So I like your point, because this was years ago, right?
Yeah.
15 years ago. So when I'm discussing things like that now, and it's funny because a lot of the projects I work on, I'm still utilizing what we talked about at the time in terms of the landmarks and the history of the area and stuff like that, especially with local. And I think if I talk to someone in marketing right now, they would say, how much does it cost to get John Harbaugh to do a video? How much does it cost to get a Ravens influencer to do a video?
Right.
But if you're a member of the media or the press, it should not cost anything except for sending the person down there and making the appointment.
Are you familiar with Street Teams?
Remind me.
It was a punk rock type thing. If you were a fan of the Ramones, you would send them letters. You would go to their concerts. You would meet some of them. If they had pins, if you were a Doors fan, the Whiskey a Go-Go would publish posters, like a Jim Morrison poster that you could take home and hang on your wall. You were an evangelist for the Doors. You were an evangelist for the Ramones. You would give out vinyl. You would give out pins.
Kind of like the Kiss Army.
You're part of a street team. You're getting all these free things that you're giving other people to promote the band. And bands like Nine Inch Nails have done this since, where Trent Reznor leaves memorabilia at concert halls in the men's rooms and stuff like that. And people track hints on USB containers. Not to do that now. It's probably something that's got a virus on it, but
no, probably not a good idea to pick up a USB flash drive in a bathroom and plug it into your computer.
No,
but I get your point. I
mean, 10, 12 years ago, Trent Reznor could have gotten away with that, but maybe not now.
Maybe not now. So you can spread your entity's influence without necessarily shortcuts of
Right.
link building, or I mean, not that link building is a shortcut, don't get me wrong, but there are ways that you can spread your entity's influence that Google's going to pick up, right?
Yeah.
That whether it's the written word, whether it's audio word, whether it's someone with a 9-inch nails sticker on their car driving past a camera that's either powered by Google or selling that data to Google. At the end of the day.
And Google's track, you use Google Lens.
Yep.
It can identify logos from entities, from bands, from cars. You
Pretty
go
amazing.
through a parking lot and you get one of those cameras like the police have where they can quickly read driver's license numbers and tell which ones are hot cars, stolen cars.
Mm-hmm.
You get some type of camera that's looking at the logos instead, and you can track all the different types of cars in parking lots.
You think you can tell the difference between a black flag logo and a white flag logo?
I'm not sure I can.
So I believe we're kind of, first of all, we're going to be out of time soon. So
Yeah.
I wanted to thank you again for making the time today to connect with me, especially on this beautiful Friday afternoon. And I'd like to thank our sponsors, Ahrefs and Adzuma, for making today possible. I'm not going to link to them because I just mentioned them, and I just mentioned those two entities on the air. So Google will pick that up, as will our listeners, and they'll go to ahrefs.com/AWT to maybe try out Ahrefs Webmaster Tools, or maybe go to Adzuma as well and check that out. But the point being is that I believe we're living in a time where, as we've discussed, not all content is written anymore, right? And to your point about video and video transcripts, Google's doing a much better job of picking up video, audio, what it means, getting the brand names correct, understanding the brand names, everything else from that perspective.
You search on YouTube for something like car racing, and you won't get results that have the words car racing in the main page for that video. You'll get videos which have car races. So you may get all like the Fast and Furious cars. Reminds me of one time I went to LAX at 3 a.m. and I tried driving home at the speed limit. And I was the only one under 20 miles an hour
down
under everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear them all night. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Where can people find you online, Bill?
Probably the easiest place to find me online is Twitter.
Okay, so you have a couple of different Twitter accounts.
It's the one I've used most frequently is Bill_Slawski, all lowercase.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to follow Bill on Twitter. Blast that out right now. You still have a what was your handle back in the Create a Site forum days?
I don't use that because I learned what it's like to actually meet people in real life. And when people can't pronounce your avatar.
Was it braggadocio? Braggadocio. Okay.
But I purposely misspelled it from the original Edmund Spencer's The Fairy Queen. He was a Black Knight.
Mm-hmm. So you had people screaming that across the bar at Search Engine Strategies Conference.
They had no idea. They had no idea how to even pronounce it.
Bag of donuts. Yeah,
it's more like it.
Yeah, I saw Amon in the comments for a while too. I think got to know him.
I finally got to meet him in person after going to London a couple of years ago.
Good. How was the experience? I see he's down at Brighton right now.
And it looks like he's having fun. I just saw a couple pictures.
Yeah, I saw a picture of him and Shelley Wash hanging out. So good to see that again. It's been a long time.
He had lived in the Brighton area, and he relocated to Swindon.
Mm-hmm.
And Swindon's going through its own COVID crisis, and a bunch of stores in the area have been closing, which makes it tough.
Speaking of which, not 100% relevant, but you kind of reminded me, is that last week on the show when I had Jason Barnard on here, he was really discussing the importance of setting up your company's history page, right? Or your own individual page as well, especially if you're associated or if someone's utilizing you as a citation or this position within the company, and especially with everything that you're doing from an authorship perspective with contributing and syncing author profiles and everything else. So just talking a little bit about Aman's history there kind of got me thinking about like updating those pages, not just for him, but for us, and then for companies as well to tell that story, almost like you would with a Wikipedia page.
If you've done stuff in the past that stands out, like Jason was a 6 foot tall blue dog, and he sang. He played bass and sang in a band called Barking Dogs.
Folk punk, I believe.
Lily Ray, who's does SEO out of New York. She was a teenage drummer. She's also in Music Brains. She didn't know how to get a knowledge graph. I suggested submit the Music Brain stuff. She did. It started showing her as a drummer, and she added stuff, so now it shows her as an SEO.
Yeah, it's funny for Jason's profile. It has all of the music stuff and the IMDb information and this and that, and then it has it has people of art also searched for or whatever, and it's like you, Rand, other people. It's like, what's going on here? There's a blue dog over here, and there's music over here, and then there's SEOs there. It's really funny trying to see Google figure out an entity.
It's strange, the list of people they have who also are also searched for in addition to me. Because they've got Gene Roddenberry, they've got George Orwell.
Really?
Yeah. At least one other guy like George Orwell.
Is that because of your love of science fiction or something?
I think it might be, but I don't write about science fiction too much.
No.
But it's catching people who search for stuff when they search for me.
So that's really the importance, even if you're not in the knowledge, or even if you haven't built up your knowledge graph presence. I would say step one is probably building an about me page on your site.
Build stuff that will convince them to do searches, so that query sessions happen around you, around your name.
Oh, speaking of which, Zara also corrected me in the comments. A brand is not an entity, or brand is not equal an entity. And that reminded me a little bit of a story you also told me when we were working together about the Reznor brand. Yeah. You remember that story?
I talked about a industrial factory I worked at, and there was a heater in the factory that was a Reznor brand heater. So it was built by the company that Trent Reznor's grandfather started. And that's why they named the heaters after him. And that's how Reznor got first heard of anything to do with industrial anything. Like the percussion and the rough edges of industrial music.
By sitting in the factory listening to all those sounds.
Yeah.
While his grandfather or father was probably installing those heaters. And probably has a lot to do with the imagery in the videos as well, I would imagine.
I would think so too.
Yeah. So industrial music actually has its roots in the Industrial Revolution, and the Reznor brand itself has been an industrial brand since day one, while the entities that are associated with Reznor are quite different.
I used to see a bunch of industrial type bands playing in Trenton, New Jersey, which is a pretty industrial town. As the bridge into and out of Trenton says, the world Trenton makes, the world takes.
Nice. So it's all connected at the end of the day. So getting that information, getting that history, getting that background, trying to put together a lesson here because I have been rambling a little bit, but getting together all of that background helps Google understand you more as an entity. Therefore, and if Google and readers and your audience and your customers can understand your past more.
The thing that surprised me about that brand penetration patent was that Google is acting as if it's got a real world physical Googlebot. It's collecting as much information about the world around it. I mean,
half of cell phone owners have a Googlebot.
So Google doesn't just index the web; it indexes what we do on the web, what we create. If we're creating companies, if we're creating products, Google's tracking that stuff. Yes, they want that information. If we're buying brands, if we're distributing them, Google's tracking that too.
So feed Google what it wants. And it wants to know about you. Or what you want to feed it. It's going to find out anyway, but it's better feed it. The one thing Jason was talking about is giving it a core, right? Yeah. And then letting all the different third parties out there basically corroborate your story.
So one of the patents I pointed Jason to recently was one on query templates. And what it says was the different type of entities the knowledge panel might be about may have different types of data. So musician includes what types of instruments you play, what bands you performed in, what songs you sung, so on. For a movie, there what shows you acted in, whether you played on Broadway, Hollywood, TV. If links on a set of search results pointed to the authoritative site for that knowledge panel, and they're not getting too many clicks, Google's tracking clicks to everything. And they can tell things that should be getting clicks on your search results aren't getting clicks. They can add query revisions to your knowledge panel. So your site gets more clicks. So having a knowledge panel can be really helpful to you as an entity. And claiming a knowledge panel makes sense.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Especially in the world of mobile search. Bill, it has been a pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks to everybody that tuned in for today's live episode. And thanks for all the listeners out there that are listening on the Search Engine Journal Show podcast. Bill, I dropped your Twitter handle in the comments.
Yeah.
You've been at Go Fish Digital for a good decade now, I believe. Correct?
Not quite that long, but close.
Close.
Yeah.
And congrats on all of the prizes that you've won at Go Fish Digital over the years on behalf of your clients and the great work that you've done. It's good to see that. It's nice to get that recognition, right? And it's good to see you getting that recognition as well, and the team that you work with getting that recognition.
It's turned into a good opportunity to teach each other and learn from one another.
I agree. I agree. So I'm all into entity stuff right now. I'm going to review these patents that you sent over. Anything else, let me know. We're going to do a wrap up with some links. So if there's anything else, anything that you've referred to that's on SEO by the Sea or that's on Go Fish Digital or any direct patents, please feel free to send them over, shoot them over to me in our Twitter chat. And we'll share that with our audience here at SEJ.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Bill. And thanks to everybody again for listening and tuning in to today's episode of the SEJ Show, brought to you by Ahrefs and Adzuma. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye now. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Search Engine Journal Show. If you liked this episode, subscribe to our channel for so much more and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing.